Let me call the meeting to order. This is a regularly scheduled Greer City Council meeting called and convened this the 12th day of May 2015. Having called the meeting to order, I'd like to ask you, if you would, please to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance and then the invocation by Councilman Lee Dennis.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for allowing us to come here tonight and to live in a free nation, and the ability to gather here and to make decisions about a great city that you've given us. We pray for all those in harm's way tonight, those that are serving the city and those that continue to serve us going forward. Lord, we ask your hand of protection and guidance and direction in their lives. And we ask that you give us guidance and direction here tonight and to remember those that live here in the city and help us to think about what's going to benefit them most for the long term. In Jesus' precious and holy name we pray. Amen. Amen.
Ms. Duncan, do we have anybody to appear in public forum this evening?
No, sir.
That then we'll move to the minutes of our council meeting. Council, the minutes from the April 28th meeting are contained in your packet. I'll hear a motion that they be received.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second in that regard. Any items of note for the clerk? Hearing none. Ms. Duncan?
Ms. Bookert?
Yes.
Mr. Dumas?
Yes.
Mr. Bettis?
Yes.
Ms. Albert?
Yes.
Mayor Danner?
Yes. With that, we'll move to the administrator's report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. A couple of items to bring to your attention this evening. One is that we are currently are heavily engaged in our budget process. We typically are at this point where we are trying to evaluate our business license income, and we're looking at projections for our statewide collections on telecommunications and for insurance. Have not received those final numbers yet, so we're still trying to make sure we can confirm some of those revenue items. Process is looking good. We feel very comfortable as we're moving forward in this. There's a few things that we are having to work out, but nothing that's giving us great alarm at this point. What we would like to do is to bring the budget to you at your next meeting. We will bring that we would present it as part of the council meeting. So we will present the budget in that evening. We will place on your agenda for that evening first reading. It does require 2 readings. We will place it for first reading on the agenda, but certainly recognize that there may be a request for us to hold that first reading over to the first meeting in June. And if that is the desire, there's absolutely no problem with us doing that whatsoever. So we'll either do first reading May 26th and public hearing on June the 9th, or we will present on the 26th and hold over, and then we would do the first reading on June the 9th, and we would hold the public hearing and second reading on June 23rd. So we'll just kind of see how that goes and where your comfort level is as we continue to move forward. You'll certainly have it in your hands before the council meeting. We'll have the budget distributed to you prior to that evening, the weekend before, so you've had an opportunity to look through it. There will be a transmittal letter, as you've had in years past, that'll give some highlights of the budget itself, and then, of course, we'll present that in workshop or in session at your next meeting. So that's kind of how we'll continue to move forward with that. A couple of calendar items certainly want to make sure that you're aware of. One, I've sent you a written communication about, and that is the Greer Community Master Plan Community Celebration Meeting. That's going to be coming up on May the 28th. That'll be at the Cannon Center. We will be working with our partners at Partnership for Tomorrow, Greer Development Corporation, Chamber of Commerce, and our many other partners that have been involved in this, which is really, while we are billing that we've been involved in the planning process for 18 months, we here internally have been working on this for a little over 2 years. We spent about 6 months developing the request for proposals, looking at different groups to lead us through that process. But we've been engaged in the planning process now for about 18 months. And we're very, very excited that we're at the point of being able to reveal that plan to our community. And we're going to do that in a community celebration. Again, that is on May 28th. It will begin at 5:30. We'll have some social time there as we gather from about 5:30 to 6:30. Then we'll spend about a half an hour in some presentation and looking at the highlights of the plan. We have some really special ways of doing that evening. I think you'll thoroughly enjoy that. Our communications staff has been working very, very hard in preparing that information for us. And then we'll conclude that at about 7 o'clock, and then we'll spend the remainder of the evening having an opportunity to talk with our consultant group, but there'll also be, it will be social as well. So there will be food and entertainment and beverage provided for us that evening. It will truly be an appropriate way for us to celebrate the conclusion of this planning process as we now present the plan and then have it available for us as we continue to do our strategic planning and our comprehensive planning for the next 15 years. So it'll be a good blueprint for us to continue to move forward. I hope that you can plan to join us. I hope that your guest can join us as well. This is an event that we would like to celebrate with other important folks in our lives. So your guest or your spouse is certainly invited to join us that evening as well. May 28th, Thursday evening, beginning at 5:30 that evening. Another event important in the life of the city for our employees is our annual Employee Appreciation Family Picnic. And that will be taking place on Saturday, June the 6th. It's an event that will run from about 11 to 1 o'clock. We'll confirm the exact times with that, but we typically do that right there in the lunch hour. It's a great opportunity for us with our employees and all of their families to come and celebrate here on the grounds at City Park. It's a great opportunity for us to enjoy fellowship together and food together. But this is not only our employees, but our employees' families. So we are looking forward to that on June the 6th. You will have some information provided to you in your mailboxes this evening. Just as a reminder, I did send you some earlier information on this as well, but we are needing to make arrangements for the upcoming Municipal Association Summer Conference, and we'll need that information by the time we meet in 2 weeks so that we can confirm those reservations moving forward as well. So I ask that you consider what your plans may be relative to that training opportunity and that summer meeting hosted by the Municipal Association so that we can get those reservations confirmed. Also this evening, I've asked Police Chief Dan Reynolds if he would please come forward. We have some information that's been provided to us and a request that's been made of us. The formal request is by the City of Myrtle Beach. It is for a law enforcement assistance and support contract. It would require that council would approve us to enter into the contractual arrangement with them. But in short, it is a request for us to provide officers to support their efforts for their Memorial Day weekend activities that take place there. I've asked Chief Reynolds if he would provide us with some additional information about what would be needed for us to be able to honor that request if it is council's desire for us to do so, and to be available this evening to answer any questions that you may have about that program as well. So Chief Reynolds?
Basically what Chief Warren has asked several departments throughout the state is to provide some resources to him during Bike Week, 21st to the 25th of the Memorial Day weekend. I've considered this in the past, but didn't feel like I wanted to do it back then. But I feel today we can afford to do this. We have 2 officers from the school resource, Steve Anderson and Harry Bowens, and 2 of our traffic individuals, one of them being Sergeant Ballinger, who is very well trained and very well experienced in these areas. to go down there and help Myrtle Beach with the issues they have to deal with down there during Bike Week. I feel this is good training for them, a reality training. If you go down there and see what's going on and see how people deal with these situations. And I have every confidence, these are mature officers, they've been there with us for a very long time, especially Sergeant Ballinger, who's got both military experience and was a first sergeant in the National Guard and also been with us for a long time and really knows how to deal with people. And this is an opportunity for some reality training in this area, both in crowd control, public safety, traffic control, those kind of things. The officers, we doubled up with Myrtle Beach officers so they'll know, where to go. They may be out in the outer areas and doing regular patrol while the Myrtle Beach officers are in and around some of the problem areas. But I really feel like this is an opportunity for us to provide some support to the city that will need it during this time period. And hopefully, if we ever have the need, they'll send people up here to help us with this kind of situation.
City of Myrtle Beach would provide lodging accommodations for our officers. They'll provide all meals for the officers, as well as they provide a per diem for the officers. The officers would also be compensated by us. We don't alter their compensation, so it's a matter of how the schedule works in getting them down there. I believe you're looking at 4 officers.
4 officers, 3 officers and a sergeant.
For that, they would take our equipment, our vehicles would transport them there. Again, I don't know if you're looking at 2 or 4 vehicles, I'm not sure how many
Our
you're
vehicles
sending.
that go down there, there'd probably be just 2 vehicles, would be parked in a secure area, and the place that they're going to stay in, they ride with Myrtle Beach officers in Myrtle Beach vehicles.
So our vehicles would not be used in patrol, they would be for transport, and then they would be paired with Myrtle Beach officers on site there. They provide a pretty basic contract. I've reviewed it more from the liability side and some concerns. There is language in the contract that says that it can be amended by either party. So I've talked with Chief Reynolds that if this is something that council believes that we should do, there are a couple of provisions in the contract relative to workers' compensation and liability that I would want to have a little modification to the agreement on how that would be covered, just to protect our interests long-term as well. And then I would also want to have some language in the contract relative to the equipment, that if for some reason the equipment was damaged because of an event that takes place, not, if our officer was to wreck the car, that's us. But if we are, but that would never happen, right? But if, or back into anything, never happened.
Never seen that.
But if there were an event that was there and our vehicle for some reason should be damaged, then I would feel strongly that that's a property casualty liability issue that they should be able to bear as part of their insurance for us as well. Those are some minor modifications that we would want to see in it. But since it was a use of resources for the city, and it's a request for mutual aid that certainly draws attention statewide. We've been reading a lot about what's been going on there. I thought it would be appropriate for the chief to be here with us this evening to answer any questions that you may have. And of course, if it is our desire to honor the request by the city of Myrtle Beach to send some support, then I would need action by council to allow us to enter into that agreement.
Mr. Driggers, how does that work in terms of workers' compensation? I mean, if one of our officers is injured during that event, does that responsibility fall on our insurance long-term?
Well, under the terms of their agreement, as they have proposed it, it would. My response to them would be that there needs to be an amendment to that language that the liability for an injury of an officer would have to be borne by their workers' compensation insurance. We would be an acting agent. It's very similar to our officers who do secondary employment. And we require workers' compensation to either be provided by, in our case, a bank, the hospital, those such. So we have provisions for that to be done. It just wasn't included in the agreement, and I would suggest that we would require that.
What legal indemnity do we have in terms of if there were some sort of class action lawsuit filed against the Myrtle Beach Police Department and/or specific individuals in regards to profiling or any number of different things? What if, would we be involved in that as a participant in the operation?
Well, one of the things that state law does not allow a division of the state or a local government, whether it's state government, county government, school board, or municipal government, is that we don't have the ability to hold harmless another or to indemnify another. Our state constitution actually disallows indemnification. So they can't indemnify us, nor can we indemnify them. Each agency is on its own relative to if there were negligence or liability by action. We just can't hold harmless the other because we're prohibited from doing that.
And this is for how many days?
5 days,
And
from
they're-
Thursday to Monday.
Thursday.
And why would they not be paid our officer's salary if we're working for them?
It's the same way with a hurricane or anything else, that there's reciprocation with other departments in case there's an emergency or some kind of mitigating circumstances that officers are needed in a place. I've had to call Duncan, I've had to call Spartanburg on 2 or 3 occasions since I've been here to back us up because of some problems we had at a homicide scene or something else for crowd control. This is a little different because it's for an extended period of time.
And it's not for an emergency.
Um,
Not yet, anyway.
It's not.
Yeah. And our agreements concerning, I mean, we have a standing agreement with the town of Mount Pleasant. We have a reciprocal agreement with them. It's been a long-standing agreement. I think it's 10 years or so that we've had that enforced. It does provide for compensation of wages and expenses. Those are predetermined in that agreement. But that's one that we have, that they can rely on us and we can rely on them for immediate response because that contract is in place. Others, you typically will do a need type call. You'd say, we have a situation, we have a circumstance, we have a need. Ice storms, hurricanes, is typically what will happen. Folks will come in from within the state, they'll come from outside the state. But most places will require in there that the compensation for those employees are provided for through that emergency. And the reason that you typically see that is because in an emergency, you're most likely going to have a FEMA declaration for an emergency, and resources are available to make those payments.
Do we know how many other municipalities they've requested this of?
I know that they have, but I don't know how many, and nor do I know who is sending folks. I'm just not aware of who that may be. I know that surrounding areas are doing it. Horry County municipalities are participating and working with them. Horry County is working with them to provide officers. The State Highway Patrol is working with them to provide officers. But I'm not familiar outside of the Horry County area if others are or not. Chief, you may know just with your professional association with other chiefs.
Yeah, I know there are others outside of those areas, but I can't give you the names of those agencies. I can find that out.
So during this period, it's going to cost us to we're going to have to double up on our men to cover our territory? When we miss these people?
Most of these people are assigned like to the school.
Right.
And we're not going to, no, we just provide that service at that time. We'll provide the service through the middle school officers will watch the high schools at that time which happens when they go on vacation, and we've often done that. The traffic officers are an auxiliary in addition to patrol, so there's only one of them going, and the sergeant going with them.
Have we calculated what this is going to cost us to do?
No, sir, I have not talked with them.
Did they have a lot of trouble last year?
Yes,
Did they request this of other places last year?
yes.
Did it help?
It probably helped, I don't know. I can't guarantee that it did.
Chief, I've got some questions about it. I know that this new traffic plan that they've got in place is going to require them to drive, 50 miles to make a circle to get back to town or something like that. And I know that their department has been practicing for some time about how they're going to handle this. Why are we just getting a call a week before the event?
Because nobody else will sign up for it. huh?
I've known about this for a while and agreed to request that we.
Yeah. We actually, in fairness, we had it prepared for the last meeting. Chief Reynolds asked me to hold it because I was requesting some information from the insurance company about making modifications. I'm not sure how far we've had it, but I'd say we've had it about a month.
Yeah, we've had about a month, and we've had to go through some training. The officers have that are going down there, especially some sensitivity training and other training about Myrtle Beach.
You said you had hesitations before. What were those?
Do what?
You said that you had hesitations before in previous years.
Yeah, shortages of manpower. And, I certainly would want more people, and I'm going to ask for more people. But at this time, I think we can afford to send them out. If you're all right with that. If not,
Yeah, I think the real issue for us is that a municipality within South Carolina has made a request. Some departments are electing to participate, and we would not be the only one. We certainly could get you a list. We would ask who else is participating. We know that there are others who are participating. But there are departments that are electing not to participate, and there are those who are electing to participate. And I did not feel that it was appropriate for this to be an administrative decision. This is a use of resources. It could be, there could be a problem down there during the event. And the last thing that I wanted to have happen is that you read that I've got 4 officers in Myrtle Beach on a mutual aid program. This needed to be a policy decision, not a managerial decision. And that's why we felt it was appropriate to bring it to council. The chief feels that he has the available resources. It's a matter of policy of whether that's the appropriate use of our resources, and do we want to attempt to assist with the request.
It sounds like, as far as a policy decision is concerned, I mean, it's not an emergent situation. So it's kind of, you mentioned the reciprocal relationship that we've enjoyed with departments that are in close proximity to us, in that, they scratch our backs and we scratch theirs. That's a reciprocal relationship. It goes back and forth. This seems like it could potentially be a one-way deal where we go to Myrtle Beach, and the likelihood that they'll come here to, do you think, is that
if we had an
far-fetched?
extended long-term situation or has a disaster or something like that, I certainly would ask them for that. I would expect that they would send somebody to help us. The thing is, I do send officers to other departments to work alongside other officers. Why do I do that? I do that because we want to learn what they do and how they handle certain situations. Certainly, this community is very safe, and we've never had to deal, well, not with a major event like Bike Week, but there's always a chance that something could happen, and I certainly would like to have some people with some experience at least see what goes on and how to handle those things, if that's your way.
That's a good way to look at it.
So what do we hope that our resource officers take away from this? Did you ask for volunteers, or did we pick for
I
people,
picked.
or-
I don't want to send just anybody down there. I want to mature officers, people that knew how to handle things, interpersonal skills and things like that.
I think one of the biggest reasons with our school resource officers is they are extremely well-trained in diffusing situations. And that's one of the things that they are most experienced at and trained at, is that when a situation gets elevated, they have great training in being able to get folks calmed down. And I think that's one of the bigger reasons for looking at those folks, as well as it's a holiday weekend and they will not be in the schools.
Well, there's a big difference in who they're used to dealing with.
Oh, yes.
Who they
Yes, sir.
potentially would be
Absolutely.
dealing with.
Absolutely.
Wow, that's a lot of difference.
I would only agree to this if we resolve whatever contractual issues that we had concerns about before we sent anybody down there. It's asking a lot that we're going to drive our own vehicles down there and back and not be reimbursed for that. Maybe small potatoes in the big picture, but if you're going to ask for mutual aid, I think you ought to reciprocate. It's a little different than driving from here to Duncan.
And the stay is on us too?
No, they provide.
They're going to pay for that,
They-
okay.
Other questions of the chief? Or the administrator, we need to take an action in regards to this, one way or the other. I'll entertain a motion for discussion.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second, floor is open for discussion.
The motion to approve with amendments to the contract, is that?
What is your motion?
To approve with amendments.
To move, to approve with amendments.
Those would be relative to any type of reimbursement and liability, particularly on workers' compensation.
I think we would certainly want a contractual arrangement that, from the administrative side, that you were comfortable with.
Yes, sir.
While it may be our decision to make policy, it's
Yes.
your decision to protect our
Well,
employees.
we have advice from our insurance provider on what some of those changes would be.
Discussion, council?
Well, I have full confidence in the men or women that the chief would pick. I'm not excited about them doing this, but I believe it would be good to expose them to it for training purposes. That's why I'm looking at it. Real life training. And I have all confidence in the people that we would send down there. I do think it's not good that we're not being reimbursed for their salary. I don't understand that. That's me.
Others? Ms. Duncan?
Ms. Booker?
Yes.
Mr. Dumas?
Yes.
Mr. Bettis?
Yes.
Ms. Albert? Yes. Mayor Danner?
Yes. Did you have other items for the administrative report?
I apologize, Mr. Mayor. I would ask council's consideration for two items in executive session, both of those being economic development matters. that will conclude my report.
Thank you, sir. We'll move to items of new business, the first of which is the first reading of ordinance number 15-2015. This is an ordinance to provide for the annexation of property owned by John Stewart Jr. located on Ansel School Road in North Wood Lane by 100% petition and to establish a zoning classification of DRD for said property. Mr. Pace?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We are considering annexation of this property, again located on Ansel School Road. This property is bounded by Ansel School Road, Northwood Road, and Holiday Road in the northern part of the city. Again, they are proposing the design review district zoning for this particular property, and it would encompass 6 acres and looking at 34 townhome units. The statement of intent thus far does say 1 and 2-story. However, some renderings submitted at this current time only show a 1-story with garage, off-street parking in relationship to this property. This will go to the Planning Commission on the 18th of this month.
Are we looking at the property on the big map, Mr. Pace?
This is the property.
Oh, okay,
Here.
okay, I'm with you. All right.
Yes, sir. This is Chestnut Hill. This is Ashley Commons over here. The Northwood Baptist Church is located adjacent to, appears to be a couple of smaller single-family dwellings separating the property from the church.
Is it just going to be one in and out, a loop, basically?
Currently, they have proposed only one entrance, one egress. There will have to be provisions made for an emergency ingress, egress somewhere else, and that may come in contact with Holiday Road to the rear, but that would be some type of structure to keep normal traffic from using it, only for emergency purposes.
Is there any consideration given as far as the mouth of Chestnut Hills plantation there and then this neighborhood? I mean, do they try to offset those, or do they meet each other, or how does that intersection going to shake out?
Current standards, this is what's proposed at this current time. Again, subject to change. Again, this is strictly a proposal at this time, but it would, in fact, line up with, their entrance would line up with the entrance to Chestnut Hill. This is a recommended practice to align your intersections instead of offsets.
That way they can kind of see each other, who's coming and going, and if they're...
Yes.
Gotcha.
And sight distances and other things to the right and left have already been proven for Chestnut Hills that they have adequate sight distance, and that would provide this one with adequate sight distance.
Mr. Pace, I've shared with you, I've received several calls from the residents in Chestnut Hills, and I think it sounds like a lot of their concern is that, you know, once we zone this property multifamily, that we're going to kind of lose control over it. And you mentioned that's kind of why we selected DRD, and can you kind of go into that?
Yes, sir, very much. That's been real successful for us in a lot of new communities we've done throughout the city is our design review district zoning. This does not blanketly permit uses to happen that are multifamily related on this property. This is specific to the plan that is submitted and the plan that will still have to get a final development plan approval from the Planning Commission also. So if that project per se goes away, then we would seek to, the city would seek to rezone it to a residential classification suitable to the area, and therefore that project would just die and go away without another one being able to come in with RM zoning and construct whatever density would be permissible and whatever appearance would be permissible and all those issues. This does give us some leeway to look at design before it happens instead of after the fact.
So if they came back and wanted to make revisions from the original plan, what would that process look like?
It would depend on whether we, by statute, have it as a major change or a minor change. If you're increasing density or roads or anything like that, that would be considered a major change. That's going to go through the entire process of City Council, Planning Commission, public hearings, and all of this. Minor changes, Planning Commission would hear some of those minor changes again, but posting and public hearings being available for the property again.
By a show of hand, is the owner of the property or a representative of the owner of the property with us this evening? Let the records so indicate no one indicated so.
Another question that's come up in some of the communication with the residents, they obviously have concerns about traffic
Yes.
on the road. I kind of wanted you to maybe address that from a zoning perspective. Is traffic considered in these decisions, and how does that come into play? And
Safe traffic is a consideration, although it's not the factor of determination. But in fact, we're looking at the type units that are being requested, single level, townhome type attached units, with what general population would be in those type units. We're looking at 2 and 3 bedroom units, that it usually will warrant less traffic than it would sometimes single family detached dwellings that may attract larger families to these, and these would more or less attract empty nesters, non-family type situations. Therefore, hours of travel would be different than rush hours and peak hours. But again, the size of it with 34 units would not activate our requirement for a traffic impact study to be done on the road. But we've analyzed it as far as common practices and how that would impact the road. Currently, we think the impact would be less than if it was fully developed in some sort of single-family detached or multi-family of greater density.
what density would kick in that traffic study?
You're going to have to get upwards of 100 plus units for the total site. And this would never reach that capacity unless you're going 4 and 5 stories, and that's not going to happen.
Public hearing will be conducted May 18th, is that correct?
Yes, sir, I believe that's the actual meeting. Yes, sir, May 18th is the meeting date for the Planning Commission.
All right. Council will entertain a motion to receive first reading of ordinance number 15-2015.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Floor is open for any further discussion or questions. Hearing none, Ms. Duncan.
Ms. Booker?
Yes.
Mr. Dumas?
Yes.
Mr. Bettis?
Yes.
Ms. Albert? Yes. Mayor Danner?
Yes.
Mayor Danner, if we may, I'd like to ask Mr. Pace if he would stay at the podium for a moment. In reviewing this particular project, one of the things that we identified, one of the things that happens is the staff meets all of our departments. Anytime that we're looking at an annexation project, all of our departments meet to determine the potential impact that annexation will have on existing city services. So we want to know what's it going to require for law enforcement, what's it going to require for fire, who covers it, is this our district, is this our partner district, do we do it under contract, what's going to be required for garbage pickup. All of those questions, we try to review those as we work through the process. And one of the things that came up in this particular project, I thought was worthy to bring back to you to make sure that we are interpreting and that we are complying with your desire for development. You'll note that this is a project that has frontage on 3 roadways. We have Ansel School Road, Glenn, was it Dobson?
Northwood, north of the side, Holiday to the rear.
And Holiday, I don't know where from Dobson,
Yes.
I'm sorry, Holiday.
Yes.
So we have 3 roadways. One is the frontage. Ansel School Road is where the roadway and the cars would have ingress and egress. We'll have an emergency area that would be on one of the 2 remaining streets. But our interpretation and your desire would be that we would require the developer of this project to place sidewalk on those 3 roadways. 6 acres of property, 34 acres, and an area behind that probably will never grow into the city. Possibly, possibly not. Is it our intent that we would indeed require sidewalks to be constructed on 3 roadways for a 6-acre site and 34 units? The answer is yes, then that's how we proceed.
So you're saying...
Well, I'm concerned that we're building sidewalks to nowhere.
Well, there's no connectivity. I mean,
There is no connectivity.
and Chestnut Hills is a good, I mean, they don't have sidewalks.
No, sir, that was developed before the sidewalk.
And I don't, and don't misunderstand, we do not disagree at all with the theory that over time, these may connect.
May connect,
We-
right,
we-
because
we-
we've got several out on Batesville Road right now that, of course, most of the newer ones that's come in, they've complied, and then we have one that come along stuck in the county, and it, did not join in
Right.
with the others.
Well, in this scenario, though, the adjacent parcel to the left, I believe it's vacant. Is that right? Isn't there a parcel between this one and the church?
All of a sudden, my maps didn't work.
But I think it has single-family
There's
homes on it.
single-family.
I couldn't find it.
Yes, this being the property, there's already some, single-family here, single-family detached here. All of this is already developed, and of course, what's already in the city is developed. Yes, there could be possible development in this area, in the south area of that intersection, that still remains very open, but further development from Ansel School Road, from this project down to Highway 14, is almost not possible. I mean, it's already being used and utilized.
And so what we discussed in our staff meeting was that absolute rules are hard to make because you can't always consider all circumstances that happen, and we understand that as well. But there isn't really any leeway for us to be able to say, well, based on future growth patterns, based on our zoning, based on adjacent land use, whether or not we would require something or not require it. In this case, it fronts 3 roadways, and we would tell the developer it's got to put sidewalks on 3 roadways. What this led us in some discussion is that what we have learned in some other municipalities around the country, some programs that have been successful, is that development should indeed provide and compensate for impact that they're causing. But in some cases, other municipalities have been effective in establishing infrastructure funds that a development would be required to contribute to, so that the local municipality then could make choices about where those resources are best used. That they would not be best used on this site, but because it has impact and the responsibility is there. But it could be that we have an area that we may have development that has sidewalks but a gap, but for the city going in and building that sidewalk, it'll never get done. this would provide, or could provide resources that sidewalk would be paid for out of those dedicated, restricted funds. I'm not even proposing that that's what we do. I'm simply saying this project brought to light for us that there could be extenuating circumstances concerning development and where we require sidewalk and where we don't. It could also provide opportunity of whether or not those resources may or may not should be used in some other location. Today, we will require sidewalk on those 3 roads. I'm telling you that I'm personally not convinced, but for our policy, that would be the absolute best use of those resources at this location and based on land use of what we know of this area.
If there's only a single entrance, in the past, have we required people to sidewalk any road that joins the property?
Yes, sir. We've been doing that since probably 2002. Then again, certain variances have been granted on some properties, which is a planning commission decision, but however, as you well know, we were instructed and planning commission is made aware of your intent for sidewalks and that they be included in all areas. So staff recommendation has always been denial, and planning commission usually follows suit with that denial also for those requests.
Well, I think Rick's point is a good one. I don't know that we've ever run into this, or if we have, it's been rare.
Right, and it is rare.
And my assumption was really,
I just assumed that it went at the
Front.
entrance, wherever your entrance
Mm-hmm.
was. I really thought about it.
me too. I mean, I never really even considered this.
Well, it's like the property over, the development that Ryan Holmes is doing, I think, over on Russia Creek and Alexander.
The
Yes,
one with the curvy sidewalk.
Yeah, and they did that, down the sides and all.
Yeah, they had to do that on Alexander and
Right,
Rushing
Alexander
Creek.
and
Yes,
Russia
ma'am.
Creek, yeah.
And honestly, and that is an area that we would not have disagreed that it needed to be.
Correct.
But, I mean, just in looking at traffic patterns and how folks move around in that area, that would be one that we probably would still have in a review if there had been by the developer a request to the planning commission to have a variance to not place it. It's likely in that situation, the staff recommendation would have been to deny.
So what you're suggesting going forward possibly would be, in a case like this, to require it on Ansel School, but then since there will be impact to 2 other roads, require a fee to go into a fund.
Well, and I'm saying, I
Rather
think
than
that's
sidewalk.
something worthy of consideration, but
Right.
we don't have that in place.
Right.
I'm just saying, that's something that we may want to think of. But in this particular project, when we evaluated its placement and the future land use of what is potentially going to happen out there,
Yeah.
I personally struggled with requiring sidewalks on those other 2 streets.
Yeah, I agree.
And for that reason, but Mr. Pace has very strong belief that it is council's desire that we put sidewalk on every street, abutting property that is developed in the city, no matter where, no matter what.
I think that's a good idea.
It's never been this councilman's desire. I think I voted against that ordinance.
So that was an ordinance. that
So again,
was-
we don't disagree. We're just simply saying that we want to make sure that we are fulfilling council's desire for development of our city.
Well, my problem was always that it needed to be a practical need, that we were going to have pieces of sidewalk stranded and non-connected, and we have that.
And we
Well,
do.
there's a lot of places that they had put the sidewalks, and there would be a lot of connectivity too, just like on Dillard. I think out on Dillard where, they put those Riverwalk and, whatever that's.
Greystone Cottages.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, we even let an exception on Dillard Road, did we not?
The planning commission did, but that gap has.
Well, I think he came along and said he would put
Oh,
the
really?
sidewalks, and then he
Yeah.
changed his mind.
So what is the process for this particular developer to ask for relief on the 2 roads that aren't the entrance, if he wanted to see some sort of variance?
If he wanted, it is a land development regulation requirement.
Uh-huh.
The only appeal for a land development regulation requirement is the planning commission, which isn't the norm for most variances, but the planning commission would hear a request for relief from anything within the land development regulation. Road width, curbing gutters and all those issues could be heard by the planning commission if a developer so asked for that variance.
And under the purview of what you charged your planning commission with and their duties and responsibilities, I think that's an appropriate place. I mean, that really is their charge in your appointment to them in the planning commission in considering is it appropriate or in this certain circumstance would it not be appropriate. We've been operating under the premise that it's not appropriate ever. To grant a variance.
I understand that, and I understand Councilwoman's hesitation to vary from that, because we have seen how it works both good and bad. And we know that there are situations where we do lack connectivity because of decisions that were made that could have been. We also have examples of where we do have sidewalks to nowhere that will never be connected, and we know that too. I think that we also need to be reasonable from time to time and err on the side of common sense. If there are no entrances on either of those two sides, I'm not sure that it serves the best interest of us to do sidewalk along that road. I mean, the two other roads other than Ansel School. Now, I think there's obviously a case that could be made that if we do require it to be put along Ansel School Road, it may never connect with anything. But until we have a different or better policy, I don't think we can waver from that. I think you make a valid point in this particular case. I would be supportive of offering some sort of variance, and would be supportive of a variance if the planning commission agreed with it, that it would be appropriate to have sidewalk along the school road, but to offer a variance on the other two pieces. I suspect that's clear as mud, is it not, Mr. Bates?
And somewhat, yes, sir.
No, it's actually very helpful for us, because, again, we want to make sure that either what we are considering at the staff level or when we're making recommendations to the planning commission, either in our report or through our folks on the planning side, we want to make sure that we're doing that logically and that we're doing it with good intent moving forward. This one just raised some red flags. The developer didn't request it. This is not a developer saying, don't ask me to do it. But I will say this, even in those cases where we would allow a variance, I would have very strong opinion, and we have continued to do this, that we do require the developer to provide right-of-way for future sidewalk. Even if we don't install it, if there's something happens in the future that we just didn't see happening, there's at least right-of-way has already been acquired. It is dedicated and it's there so that we would never have to purchase right-of-way to install sidewalk.
I'd be agreeable with that.
That has been a common practice that
Yeah.
has been followed for the variances that have been granted in the past, was that appropriations be made for road widening and/or
Right.
sidewalks if needed for that area. And they seem very receptive, developers do, to that process. I mean, yeah, it cuts into something that they could develop, developable area but allowing for it, because that will increase their setbacks and minimum size to the road and everything else if they're giving us additional right-of-way on those roads. So it has an impact to them.
So are you saying if they don't put the sidewalks in, that they compensate the city in some way?
Well,
Use that money someplace else?
Well, we don't have that in place. I'm simply offering that may be something for us to consider if there are these types of circumstances in the future, if there are places that sidewalk could be required, but the variance is allowed, the variance may then require, and I've seen this, in some locations, it's dollar for dollar, that if it costs $30 a linear foot to build sidewalk, then they have to contribute $30 per linear foot of space. I've seen municipalities that will do that on a 50-50 basis, that if it's not required, then, because sometimes the developer sometimes goes, well, if I got to pay for it, I'll just put it out here on my project.
Good idea.
But sometimes they'll offer that. These are not unusual things that you will find in other communities that are experiencing growth. The mayor and I looked at one several years ago that required a percentage of all project costs had to be placed into a fund for future public art. And it required it for all development. And there are a number of cities that require that 1/10% of the project, or 1/100th% of the project, and those funds are set aside and they're only used for development of whatever that may be. Some communities use it for public art, some use it for bike and walking trails and paths, some use it for public parks. I mean, there are a number of things that you can do. It's not an impact fee, it's a development cost. But it serves the purpose of what an impact fee would as well. Because development does indeed cause impact to the community where it's being developed. It just isn't always in that piece of dirt. Sometimes the impact may be somewhere else. Maybe it's a public park, maybe it's a greenway, bikeway, blueway, whatever you folks may think that could have an effect. No, I simply bring that as those are some ways that other communities have addressed these issues as well. It may be something that we would want to take a look at down the road. I just offer it as an idea.
Well, what is is that Holiday, the long road?
Holiday's
The
on the
straight road,
Uh-huh.
this one, that's Northwood here Lane.
North-
Holiday is back here.
Right, okay,
would be
the Holiday's in
back
the
of the
back.
property.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, ma'am, and actual school being the front of the property.
Has no bearing on the annexation. You approve that. We thought it caused us to have a lot of conversation in the staff meeting. We thought it'd be a good opportunity to get your input and opinion on it as well.
Development plans that I showed you already include that sidewalk, the statement of intent that's required from the developer states those sidewalks are in there. So like I said, he's amenable to doing so, and this is strictly a staff position that we've seen that there could be a need for.
So unless he requests, or the developer requests the variance,
He'd put them in.
he's going to put the three.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this, if he goes forward with that, and we do have sidewalks on three sides, like we're saying for now, that go to nowhere, have we considered maybe trying to find resources to maybe put a sidewalk down the fourth side and actually maybe creating a walking loop or some kind of way to actually, for this to make sense, to where people would actually use it and get some benefit?
That is the reason we brought this tonight, because what it is doing in and of itself, we are struggling with, does that make sense?
That's a good place to walk. I mean, you got the
Well,
sidewalk.
but you're gonna get to the end, you gotta turn around and walk back. I mean, it's getting in there.
But
Okay.
still, I mean, you walk out, you go around, you come down, you turn around, come back.
Well, that's why I like the loop. If we go ahead and put the sidewalk up the other side, then you've got a loop that goes all the way around the
Yeah, but the other
community.
side's
You've
not
also
on
got,
the street. The
your
other
loop is
side's not on the
completed by
street, is it?
two adjoining properties, and I know what those two adjoining properties
You have to
are.
cut it.
I go on
Cut it.
sidewalk right through
Yeah.
my backyard.
Yeah.
I think we do, I think we've got to consider it, and when you talk about pedestrian and bike issues, I think we're all committed to that. But I think we've got to understand that there is a concept of attractive nuisance. A swimming pool is an attractive nuisance, and you've got to understand that, kids are going to be drawn to it, children are going to be drawn to it, and while it might be nice to come outside of the subdivision and walk along some of these streets, we don't know how safe those streets are. We don't know, in terms of the speeds on them and different things like that. And do we really want to send our children out of the neighborhood to go ride on sidewalks that don't go anywhere, and they may be enticed to ride in the road as opposed to the sidewalk and those kinds of
those kinds of issues. So I think we've got to think about it in a practical fashion. If it is a sidewalk that connects to a school or serves some ultimate purpose, I'm all for it. But you know, when the highway department started talking about doing sidewalks and bike lanes and all these other things on 101 and 290, you know, I was one of the first people to speak up and say, that's ludicrous. We don't want to invite people to be trying to ride their bike up Highway 101 in the middle of the afternoon. It's, you know, it just doesn't make sense in some regards, and we can be very pro-pedestrian and quality of life issues without, I just as soon see him spend that money on the interior of the subdivision and do something in terms of, you know, in enhancing the green space or the sidewalks or whatever on the inside, as I would see him spend money to sidewalk Holiday Road and Northwood Lane, or whatever it is up there. Northwood Lane is a dog path, to tell you the truth. I mean, it's 2 lanes wide.
And we don't patrol those roads, those are not city roads.
Correct.
So the city road is gonna be the road that cuts in and out of the development, and that's it. We don't patrol Ansel School at this point, right?
You know, the other thing we gotta consider is, you know, 25, 30 years from now, and that sidewalk is cracked all to pieces or upheaved, and somebody walks out there and falls and breaks their leg or breaks their arm, are we gonna go out there and replace a 500, 600, 700 foot, 1,000 foot piece of sidewalk that services possibly 30 people in the neighborhood? I mean, 30 homes in the neighborhood. I don't know, I think there's a point in time, and I would agree with the variance on this one. So,
That helps us.
we can add that to our list to discuss next time we're discussing what we want to change with some of our policies. How about that?
Very good.
Okay?
Food for thought. Thank you.
All right. In executive session, we've got 2 economic development matters to consider. Do I hear a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Ms. Duncan?
Ms. Bookert?
Yes.
Mr. Dumas?
Yes.
Mr. Bettis?
Yes.
Ms. Albert?
Yes.
Mayor Danner?
Do we vote on the annexation?
Did we vote on annexation? Yes, we voted on annexation.
Yes.
Before I started, so yes.
Yes, we did that.
Yeah, because I brought up mine after that vote.
Okay.
That's right.
Yes. In executive session, we've considered 2 economic development matters, taking no action in regards to either one. Do I hear a motion to come out of executive session?
So motion. Second.
Have a motion and a second. Ms. Duncan?
Ms. Bookert?
Yes.
Mr. Dumas?
Yes.
Mr. Bettis?
Yes.
Ms. Albert?
Yes.
Mayor Danner?
Yes. Stand adjourned.